You don't think you'll ever sign away your future until someone you love is dying in front of you, and the only thing left to trade is yourself. That's how it started for me. Not with flowers. Not with fate. With a cold envelope and a name scribbled on a business card I almost threw away. Before we jump right back in, please tell us where you're watching from and the time. My name is Ava Taylor. I'm nobody special. No inheritance. No safety net. Just a small apartment, a part-time job, waiting tables, and a younger sister named Lila, who is my entire world. Lila is the kind of girl who smiles through pain, who danced in our living room in her hospital gown, who whispered, "Don't worry, Ava, everything will work out," even as the tumor in her brain stole her strength by the hour. The day they told me she wouldn't survive without emergency surgery, something in me shattered. "You have options," the doctor said gently, like he didn't already know the answer. But there weren't options. Not for girls like me. Not when the surgery cost more than everything I'd ever made. Not when every loan office, charity, and miracle fund slammed the door in my face. I walked out of the hospital that night with tears blurring my vision, clutching a rejection letter in one hand, and that business card in the other. Damian Wolfe. It looked plain. Just a name. No title. No promise. But that name, it buzzed around town like urban legend. Damian Wolfe, the billionaire CEO of Wolfe Tech. A man with more money than morality. Ice in his veins. Power in his silence. And eyes that never revealed anything unless he wanted them to. I didn't know why he'd handed me his card in the hospital hallway. I didn't even know how he knew who I was. But I knew one thing. If there was even a 1% chance he could help Lila, I'd take it. Even if it cost me everything. They say the devil doesn't show up with horns. Sometimes, he arrives in a charcoal suit, with silence thicker than smoke and eyes sharp enough to cut through your soul. That was Damian Wolfe. He didn't say a word to me when I stepped into his office. He just stood by the floor-to-ceiling window, hands clasped behind his back, staring down at the city like he owned it. Maybe he did. The room smelled like leather and cold ambition. Everything around me was spotless, expensive, controlled. Like one wrong breath would cost me more than I could afford. I stayed by the door, unsure if I was supposed to speak first. "I was starting to think you wouldn't call," he said without turning. "I almost didn't," I answered, gripping my purse like it could hold me together. He turned slowly, his gaze settling on me in my borrowed heels and coat with a missing button. I'd never felt so small in someone's presence. Not because he was loud, but because Damian Wolfe didn't need to be. He walked over to a sleek glass table and picked up a folder. "I assume you came because your sister's condition worsened." I stiffened. "She has 3 weeks. Maybe less. The hospital won't schedule the surgery without the deposit." He opened the folder and placed a contract between us. "This will cover everything. Surgery, treatment, aftercare, even a private nurse. No debt. No repayment." I stared at the paperwork, heart pounding. "And the catch?" I asked, barely able to speak. His voice was smooth, emotionless. "You become my wife." I blinked. "You're what?" 1 year. In name only. A legal marriage. Appearances at social functions. Public events. Dinners where you smile and pretend we're in love. My throat closed. "Why me?" He didn't hesitate. "Because you're quiet. You're not chasing fame. You don't have an online footprint that'll bite me in the future. You're clean, unattached. And most importantly, you're desperate." I flinched. "Don't take it personally," he added. "Desperation is useful. It means you'll follow the rules." I didn't respond. My hands trembled as I flipped through the contract. It was detailed, a 1 year of legal marriage. No physical intimacy. No emotional expectations. No interference in his business or personal affairs. No public embarrassment. A clean divorce at the end. And my sister's medical bills paid in full, up front. I paused at one line, written in bold. "Any breach of contract by either party will result in immediate termination and forfeiture of all compensation." "And if I back out halfway?" I asked. He looked me dead in the eyes. "Then your sister dies." It wasn't a threat. It was a reality. I could taste the bitterness of it on my tongue. He stepped closer, lowering his voice. "You don't love me. I don't love you. But we can give the world what it wants. An illusion. That illusion protects my company from scandal, stabilizes a merger, and gives you exactly what you need. He handed me a pen. It's a transaction, Ava. Nothing more. I stared at it. My mind flashed to Lila's pale face. Her laugh. Her stubborn hope. The way she still called me Avies, like we were little kids playing make-believe in the kitchen. Then I looked up at the man in front of me. This wasn't love. This wasn't fair. But sometimes life doesn't give you fair. Just choices. I signed. And just like that, I stopped being Ava Taylor, waitress, older sister, nobody, and became Mrs. Damian Wolfe. No ring. No vows. Just ink on paper and silence thick enough to suffocate. The pen slipped from my fingers as the contract snapped shut. Damian picked it up like he was closing a deal, not rearranging my entire life. He didn't smile. He didn't congratulate me. He simply said, "The car will pick you up tomorrow. Bring only what you need. You won't be coming back here." I opened my mouth to ask 100 things. Where would I live? What would I wear? How would I face my sister? But he was already turning away. I walked out of his office with legs made of paper, my throat burning, and my mind already spiraling into 1,000 silent questions. The next day the black car came right on time. It waited outside my apartment like something out of a spy film, sleek and unbothered by the crumbling sidewalk or peeling paint. The driver didn't speak. He just opened the door, took my small suitcase and nodded. I watched the city blur past the window. I'd never been outside my neighborhood. Now I was being driven to the mansion of a billionaire I barely knew, as his bride. The Wolfe estate wasn't a house. It was a fortress. White stone, tall iron gates, trimmed hedges that didn't dare grow wild. The kind of place that screamed wealth so loudly it silenced everything else. Damian was waiting on the steps, dressed in all black as if he'd just stepped out of a magazine. Or a nightmare. He looked me over once. Not like a man admiring his bride. Like a CEO inspecting his newest acquisition. "You're late," he said. I checked my watch. "It's 11:59. He didn't laugh. In this house, late is measured in seconds. My cheeks flushed, but I followed him through the heavy front doors. The mansion swallowed me whole. Marble floors, glass chandeliers, and high ceilings that made me feel 2 inches tall. "This will be your wing," he said, gesturing down a hallway that felt longer than most city blocks. "You'll have everything you need. Staff will knock before entering. You'll attend public events as required. Outside you are my wife. Inside we keep our distance." He turned to face me, eyes unreadable. "There are 3 rules." I held my breath. 1. Never speak to the media. If they ask questions, you smile and say nothing. I nodded. 2. Don't ask about my past. Ever. Something cold crept down my spine. Okay. And 3. Don't fall in love with me. My chest tightened. I wanted to laugh. I wanted to say, "Trust me. You're the last man on earth I'd fall for." But the words wouldn't come. I spent my first night in the Wolfe mansion in a bed bigger than my entire apartment. The sheets were Egyptian cotton, the pillows felt like clouds, and yet, I didn't sleep a minute. How do you sleep when you've traded your name for a lie? I lay there in silence, listening to the occasional echo of footsteps from somewhere down the hall. A reminder that I wasn't alone here, just invisible. Morning came fast. Too fast. A soft knock sounded on the door. "Mrs. Wolfe," a voice said from behind it. "You're needed in the dressing room." Mrs. Wolfe. The title felt foreign. Like I was wearing someone else's skin. I opened the door and was met by a woman named Greta. Older, professional, polite with her words but guarded in her eyes. She led me into a vast wardrobe room that looked like a luxury boutique. Racks of designer clothes, rows of shoes arranged by heel height, jewelry displayed like artifacts in a museum. "All selected for you," she said. Mr. Wolfe requested a clean, elegant look. Sophisticated. Soft. Soft. I asked, raising an eyebrow. She didn't answer. By the time I was dressed, cream silk blouse, tailored slacks, heels I could barely walk in, I didn't recognize myself in the mirror. "Where are we going?" Finally asked. "Your first public appearance as his wife," she replied. "Smile like you mean it. Smile like you mean it." That would become my mantra. The car was already waiting. Damian sat in the back, scrolling through his phone like the world was just another app he could swipe away. He didn't look up as I climbed in. "You're late," he said again, because apparently that was his favorite greeting. It's exactly noon, I murmured, tightening my grip on my clutch. His eyes flicked to me briefly, then back to his screen. The ride was silent, except for the hum of tension sitting between us. When we arrived, I expected a quiet gathering, maybe a brunch or a company event. What I got was a sea of cameras. Paparazzi swarmed the steps of the hotel like flies to sugar. Flashbulbs. Shouts. Questions I couldn't make out over the chaos. And then his hand reached for mine. He pulled me close, placing a gentle kiss on my cheek, whispering low into my ear as the shutters exploded around us. Smile, Mrs. Wolfe. You're living every girl's dream. I turned toward the cameras with a practiced grin. But inside, I'd never felt more like a ghost in someone else's fairy tale. We walked into the ballroom like royalty. Or at least Damian did. I was just the accessory on his arm. He didn't speak much. Not to me, not to anyone unless necessary. But when he did, people listened. His presence demanded it. The way CEOs, investors, and politicians leaned in when he spoke. Like he held the key to something they'd never own. And I was there, nodding, smiling, pretending this was normal. Pretending I belonged. The whisper started halfway through the night. That's the new Mrs. Wolfe? Where did he even find her? She doesn't look like the others. The others. Damian had a past. Of course he did. Women more polished than me. Models. Heiresses. Women who'd known what fork to use and how to hold a wine glass like it was second nature. I was just Eva. Waitress. Big sister. Contract bride. He must have noticed my silence because at one point while we posed for a photo he leaned closer and whispered, "You're doing fine. Better than expected." High praise, I murmured, forcing a smile as the cameras clicked. Don't let their stares rattle you. They're just bored. I'm not rattled. His eyes scanned my face, searching for a crack. You're gripping your clutch like it insulted your mother. I looked down. My knuckles were white. He chuckled under his breath. It was quiet, barely there, but it was real. The first sign of something human under all that ice. Then his expression shifted. I followed his gaze across the room. A woman had just entered, radiating the kind of confidence you couldn't fake if you tried. She walked straight toward us, like a storm that knew exactly where it was going. Clara, Damian said under his breath. His jaw tightened. I recognized the name instantly. Clara West. His ex-fiancée. She was everything I wasn't. Elegant. Composed. Press perfect. Her lips curved in a slow smile as she looked between us. So this is the wife, she said, her voice honeyed and fake. How charming. Clara, Damian said coolly, his hand tightening slightly around mine. It's been a while. Not long enough, apparently. Her eyes lingered on me. She's cute. Different. I didn't think plain was your type. I felt the burn rise in my chest, but I stayed still. Smiled like I meant it. Damian didn't blink. She's everything you're not. Clara's eyes flashed. She stepped closer to him, ignoring me entirely. You know this won't last, she whispered. Everyone knows this is a performance. You don't love her. You don't even like people. His reply came without hesitation. But I respect her. Clara froze. That, it seemed, was worse than hatred. Without another word, she turned on her heel and vanished into the crowd. Damian exhaled slowly, then looked at me. I'm sorry, he said quietly. You didn't deserve that. I've had worse, I lied. His gaze lingered on mine longer than usual. Something unreadable danced behind his eyes. Regret, maybe. Or something deeper he didn't have words for. For the rest of the night, he didn't let go of my hand once. And I didn't want him to. But when the limo pulled up to the mansion and the door clicked shut behind us, the performance ended like a show curtain dropping. Damian let go of my hand. Without a word, he walked ahead, loosening his tie, removing his watch, disappearing down the long hallway like we were strangers again. Like the man who whispered reassurance at the gala didn't exist outside the spotlight. I stood there in the silence, unsure if I should follow. I didn't. Instead, I wandered the house. It was quiet, eerily so. The kind of quiet that echoes in your chest. I passed a grand piano that hadn't been touched in years, a library that smelled like dust and unspoken stories, and paintings that probably cost more than a college education. I found the kitchen eventually, dark except for the glow of a single under-cabinet light. I poured myself a glass of water and leaned against the counter, exhaling slowly. You did well tonight. I jumped. Damian stood in the doorway, sleeves rolled, no tie, no armor. Didn't hear you, I muttered, placing the glass down. You were focused. Or nervous, I corrected. He tilted his head. You handled Clara better than most. She insulted me to my face. And you didn't flinch. That's strength. I looked at him, unsure of what to say. This version of Damian, quiet, softer around the edges, wasn't the man from the contract. He stepped closer, folding his arms. Claire and I were together for 2 years. She left when my father died. Said I became unreachable. His voice didn't waver, but I caught the bitterness buried deep. I'm sorry, I whispered. Don't be. Loss reveals people. I nodded slowly, feeling something shift between us. You said earlier that you respect me, I said. Was that just for show? His gaze met mine. I don't say things I don't mean. We stood in that kitchen, two people orbiting each other, not sure whether to collide or retreat. For the first time, I wasn't thinking about the contract or the surgery or the lie we were living. I was thinking about him. He cleared his throat. You should get some rest. Tomorrow's schedule is full. Back to business. I nodded, walking past him toward the hallway. But as I reached the stairs, he called after me. Ava. He looked at me with something unfamiliar. Hesitation. You did more than well tonight. I smiled just a little. So did you. I wanted to say more. Ask more. But I didn't. Instead, I let the soft click of my bedroom door be the full stop at the end of a sentence I was too afraid to write. The days that followed blurred together in a rhythm I wasn't prepared for. Breakfast at 9. Appointments. Appearances. Dinners that tasted like silence. And Damian, always composed, always distant, like his soul was hidden behind a locked vault. We played the perfect couple in public. Hand in hand, synchronized steps, a kiss on the cheek when the cameras flashed. But behind closed doors we barely touched. It started with the way he remembered things I hadn't told him twice. Like how I took my tea milk first, no sugar. How I hated loud shoes on marble. How I always wore a tiny silver bracelet Lila gave me for luck. Then came the rumors. They started small. Whispers in high society circles. Tabloids printing speculation disguised as journalism. Mr. Wolfe seems different lately. Marriage suits him. She must be special. Sources say he hasn't spoken to Clara West since the gala. I didn't know whether to be flattered or afraid. Because the more people believed in us, the harder it became to remember it wasn't real. And then one evening, everything tilted. It was raining. The kind of quiet, relentless rain that made the world feel slower. Softer. I was curled up in the reading room, trying to distract myself with a novel I wasn't reading, when Damian walked in holding 2 mugs. He handed me one without a word. Milk first. I blinked. You remembered. I remember everything, he said simply, sinking into the armchair across from me. The room fell quiet. But not the usual tense kind. This was different. I never asked, he said, breaking the silence. What would you be doing if none of this had happened? I looked at him, surprised. You mean if I wasn't your fake wife? He gave the faintest smile. Exactly. I shrugged, tracing the rim of the mug. I'd probably still be working late-night shifts at the diner. Saving up for something I didn't even believe I could have. Trying to keep Lila alive with hope and aspirin. His expression softened. You gave up everything for her. She gave up everything for me first, I said. Our mom died when Lila was just 10. I raised her while I was still trying to raise myself. She's not just my sister, Damian. She's my whole heart. He didn't say anything for a long moment. Then quietly, I envy that. My father and I weren't close. He was a titan in business but a stranger at home. I spent years trying to impress a man who couldn't even look me in the eye. When he died, I thought I'd feel free. But all I felt was hollow. Something cracked in me. Something tender. For the first time, I didn't see Damian Wolfe the billionaire. I saw a boy who had everything, except love. I didn't realize I was crying until he reached out, just barely, and brushed a tear from my cheek with the back of his knuckle. His hand lingered, his breath unsteady. Ava, he whispered. My heart stopped. But then his phone rang. He pulled away like he'd been burned. Back to reality. Back to rules. He stood, cold mask sliding back into place. I have to take this. And just like that, the moment was gone. But the echo of it stayed. Long after Damian left the room, I sat in silence, my cheek still tingling from where his fingers had brushed away a tear. It wasn't the touch that lingered, it was the hesitation in his eyes. That quiet ache of a man who hadn't let himself feel in a very long time. For the next few days he was distant again. Like the moment we almost had scared him. Like he had to rebuild the walls I'd unknowingly stepped over. And yet, there were cracks in his distance. One morning I walked into the kitchen to find a cup of tea waiting. Just how I liked it. No note. No explanation. Just there. That afternoon, a scarf I mentioned once offhand, deep navy, soft wool, hand-stitched, appeared neatly folded on the edge of my dresser. Little things. Things that didn't fit into a contract. Then came the gift that changed everything. It was late. Almost midnight. I couldn't sleep. My thoughts were tangled. Lila's next checkup, the lie I was living, and the quiet pull I felt every time Damian walked into a room. I wandered the mansion restlessly, until I found myself outside a door I hadn't opened before. My name was engraved on a small golden plaque. Confused, I stepped inside. And gasped. It was a music room. But not just any music room. My music room. A glossy white baby grand piano stood in the center. Floor-to-ceiling windows framed the stars. Shelves of sheet music lined the walls. A record player sat in the corner, surrounded by vinyls I'd once told him I loved. It was beautiful. And it was impossible. I hadn't played in years. Lila used to beg me to, but I stopped after the night I sold my keyboard to pay rent. I'd never told him that. Never told him how I'd missed it. Or how music made me feel like I had a voice, even when I didn't know what to say. I turned slowly and there he was. Standing in the doorway, hands in his pockets, eyes watching me carefully. You said once, he said softly, that you loved the piano. I swallowed. I didn't think you were listening. I was. Silence stretched between us like a held breath. I had this room restored, he continued. I didn't know if it was right. If it would feel invasive. My chest ached. It feels like the first honest thing in this entire house, I whispered. He stepped closer, every movement deliberate. He didn't touch me. Didn't say anything more. He didn't need to. That night I played until my fingers ached. I poured every unspoken word into the keys. Every thank you. Every fear. Every feeling I didn't have the language for. And when I looked up he was still there. Sitting in the shadows watching me play. I didn't know how long I'd been lost in the music. Maybe an hour. Maybe longer. But when my fingers finally fell silent, and the last note echoed into stillness, something about the room had shifted. Or maybe it was something in me. I stood slowly, unsure of what to say. Damian rose too, but didn't move toward me. He just looked at me with that unreadable expression of his, like I was something he didn't know how to hold without breaking. Why are you being kind to me? I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. He didn't answer right away. Then, because you've given me something no one else has. I frowned. And what's that? A reason to come home. My breath caught. He looked away as if he hadn't meant to say it out loud. The air between us turned heavy. I took a step closer. Just one. Damian. He looked up. And suddenly we weren't pretending anymore. He closed the space between us in a single stride, and before I could think, his hand cupped my face, gentle but certain. His thumb traced my cheek, slow and reverent, like he was learning the shape of something he hadn't let himself want. Our eyes locked. And then he kissed me. It wasn't a performance. It wasn't scripted. It was raw, unavoidable. Like gravity had been pulling us toward this moment since the day we signed that contract. His other hand slid around my waist, drawing me into him. I melted because the truth was I'd been waiting for this. Denying it, fearing it, but still wanting it. I kissed him back. Hungrily. Desperately. Like he was air and I'd been drowning since the day I met him. When we finally broke apart, his forehead rested against mine. Our breaths tangled. Neither of us moved. This wasn't part of the deal, I whispered, eyes still closed. No, he murmured. It wasn't. But it feels more real than anything we agreed to. He pulled back just enough to look into my eyes. And that's what scares me. I didn't know what to say, because it scared me too. He stepped away then, slowly, like it physically pained him to do it. Good night, Ava. And he left, leaving me standing alone in the music room, lips still tingling, heart pounding like a warning and a promise. I stood in that music room long after he left, Heart pounding. Fingers trembling. Mind spinning. That kiss had changed something. Or maybe it just revealed what had been there all along, buried beneath rules and paperwork and silence. I didn't sleep that night. How could I? For the first time, I wasn't afraid of pretending. I was afraid of not pretending. Of feeling something real for a man who made it very clear that emotions weren't allowed. And yet, I could still feel the warmth of his lips on mine. The next morning, everything felt different. Damian was already gone by the time I got up. His absence hung in the air like unfinished sentences. I wandered the house restlessly, trying to distract myself, trying to not replay the kiss 100 times. Eventually, I found myself in his study. It was empty, quiet, dimly lit by morning light slipping through half-drawn curtains. I shouldn't have stepped inside. I knew that. But I did. I just wanted to feel close to him. Understand him. Know something real beyond the mask he wore like armor. Books lined the shelves. First editions, biographies, legal texts. Everything neatly arranged. Too neatly. And then, something caught my eye. A drawer, slightly ajar. I shouldn't have opened it. But I did. Inside there were folders. Paperwork. Nothing surprising at first, until I found my name. Ava Taylor. Medical reports. Credit scores. Background checks. And then hospital billing. One form stopped me cold. The payment approval form for Lila's surgery. Date, 2 days before I signed the contract. I stared at it, breath caught in my throat. He had already paid. Before I signed. Before I agreed to marry him. Before I gave up my life and name and dignity. Which meant, he never needed the marriage. He just wanted it. The air left my lungs. I stumbled back from the desk, heart racing. Betrayal slicing through me faster than I could name it. Every word he said, every look, every moment, suddenly tainted by the question screaming inside me. Why? Why did he do it? Why? Why make me believe this was a transaction when he'd already done the one thing I would have given anything for? I didn't remember walking to his room. Didn't remember my hand hitting the door hard enough to shake it. He opened it, hair damp from a shower, expression surprised, until he saw my face. What happened? He asked, voice sharp with concern. You tell me, I said, holding the paper out with shaking hands. His eyes flicked to it, then to me. He didn't deny it. I was always going to help, he said quietly. Then why the contract? My voice cracked. Why make me feel like I had to sell myself to save her? Because I knew you wouldn't take the money, he said. You would have refused it out of pride, out of fear, whatever noble reason you had that day. And your sister didn't have time. So you manipulated me. I protected you. No, Damian. You used me. You made me believe I didn't have a choice. His jaw clenched. You didn't. The words hit like a slap. I took a shaky breath, blinking back tears. That kiss, was that a lie too? He didn't answer. Didn't have to. The silence said enough. I turned and walked away, past the hallway, past the grand piano, past the room where I first felt seen. I went back to my wing, slammed the door and let the tears fall. Because this wasn't a fairy tale. It was a contract with a devil I had started to believe in. It rained that night. The kind of storm that didn't whisper. It roared. Thunder cracked like bones breaking. Wind howled like the world itself was grieving. And somewhere inside that storm I ran. I didn't pack a bag. I didn't call a car. I just grabbed my coat, slammed the front door behind me and started walking into the city. Anywhere that wasn't his mansion. His why. His world. The streets were slick and empty. My hair soaked through within minutes. My heels made it 4 blocks before I tore them off and walked barefoot. I wasn't thinking. I was feeling. And for the first time in weeks, the pain didn't wait for permission. He lied. He never needed the contract. He bought my silence, my body, my soul. For a performance I thought was saving someone. The streetlights blurred through my tears. Every honk, every siren felt too close. I wasn't crying because he'd tricked me. I was crying because, somewhere in between the first rule and that kiss, I'd fallen in love with him. And that made me the fool. I don't remember the car. Just headlights. Closer than they should have been. I heard the brakes before I felt the pain. A thud. A gasp. Darkness. And then nothing. When I opened my eyes, the world was white and sterile. A hospital. Machines beeped softly beside me. My arms were covered in bruises. My ankle was wrapped. My head ached like it had been cracked open and reassembled wrong. Then I saw him. Damian. Slumped in the chair beside me, still wearing the same clothes from the night before. Hair a mess. Eyes red-rimmed and hollow. He looked like a man who hadn't slept. Who had unraveled entirely. Damian, I croaked, voice raw. He jolted upright, grabbing my hand so fast I flinched. You're awake, he breathed, gripping my fingers tightly. Thank God. His voice cracked just once. I thought I was going to lose you. I stared at him. This man who never flinched. Never raised his voice. Never let anything touch him. He was trembling. I didn't know where you went, he continued, the words spilling out like confession. I called everyone. Hospitals. Police. I thought maybe you'd left for good. And then they called. His throat bobbed as he fought for composure. I'm sorry, Ava. I should have told you the truth. I thought I was protecting you, but I was only protecting myself. I blinked slowly, the words swimming through my dazed mind. You paid before I signed, I whispered. He nodded. I couldn't watch you beg for something you deserved. But he paused. I also didn't want to let you walk away. So I gave you a reason to stay. That's not love, Damian. I know, he said quietly. But I think what came after was. Silence settled between us. He looked at me like a man begging for a second chance without asking for it out loud. I didn't know if I could give it. Not yet. But as his hand tightened around mine, I knew this much. For all his flaws, for all his lies, he was here. And sometimes when everything else breaks, that's the only truth that matters. That truth alone got me through the pain. For the first time, it wasn't the staff or a driver or an assistant following protocol. It was Damian. Present. Silent. Unshaven. Sleepless. He never left my side in the hospital. I'd wake up to see him in the same chair, shoulders hunched forward, one hand resting on the edge of my bed like he was anchoring both of us. It wasn't the behavior of a man fulfilling a contract. It was the behavior of a man losing the battle with his own heart. Back home I was told to rest, but rest wasn't what I needed. What I needed was him. Not the man who signed contracts or posed for cameras. The man who read poetry at my bedside. The man who whispered my name like it meant something sacred. The man who looked at me like I was the only thing in a world full of noise that brought him peace. And that night, I saw him. Really saw him. He knocked on my door softly but didn't enter until I called out. I was curled up in bed, the moonlight spilling across the duvet, casting silver shadows across the room. He stood there in the doorway, hands in his pockets, shirt sleeves rolled to his elbows, expression unreadable. I couldn't sleep, he said. Me neither. He came to sit beside me, the mattress dipping slightly under his weight. I keep thinking about the accident, he said, his voice low. What if you hadn't woken up? What if I never got to fix what I broke? You're fixing it now, I whispered. I lied to you. You were scared. I still am. He turned to me then slowly and the air between us shifted. He reached out, brushing a strand of hair from my cheek, letting his fingers trail down the curve of my jaw. I don't want to pretend anymore, he murmured. Not with you. You don't have to. His hand rested against my cheek, thumb brushing over my skin like he was memorizing me. Tell me to stop, he said. And I will. I didn't. That I leaned in. And when our lips met this time there was no hesitance. No walls. No rules. Just us. The kiss deepened, soft, slow, like we were finally allowing ourselves to feel everything we'd held back. His hand slid to the nape of my neck, anchoring me, pulling me into him. My fingers tangled in his shirt, feeling the rhythm of his heartbeat against my palm. When he pulled back, breathless, his forehead rested against mine. I've wanted this for so long, he confessed. But I didn't want it to feel owed. It doesn't, I whispered. It feels inevitable. He kissed me again, this time with something between reverence and hunger. And as his hands found the curve of my waist, I let myself fall into him completely. Clothes slipped away like second skins. His mouth traced paths across my collarbone, my stomach, worshipping every inch of me with a kind of tenderness I hadn't expected. He took his time, no rush, no dominance, just presence. Connection. Every movement asked a question. Every touch waited for permission. And I gave it, over and over. We made love in the quiet hum of the night, beneath soft sheets and softer words. His body wrapped around mine like a vow he hadn't spoken yet but felt in every breath. It wasn't just physical. It was healing. It was everything the contract never mentioned, everything our rules never allowed. Afterward, we lay tangled together, his arm wrapped tightly around my waist, our bodies slick with warmth and breath. His lips brushed the top of my head. Stay. I'm already here. And in that moment I knew we had crossed a line that we couldn't, and wouldn't, walk back from. We didn't speak at first. We didn't have to. His body was still curled around mine, his breath warm against the back of my neck, our legs tangled beneath the sheets. And for the first time since the contract was signed, I felt no tension, no anxiety, just peace. The kind that made me want to close my eyes and forget that there was ever a time we weren't like this. I shifted slightly, rolling onto my back, and Damian stirred beside me. His arm tightened around my waist reflexively, like his body knew I was moving before his mind caught up. His eyes opened slowly, gray, soft, unguarded. Morning, I whispered. Hi, he murmured, voice still low and sleepy. Still here. I smiled. Still here. Then, I was afraid you'd run again. I was afraid you'd regret it. His brow furrowed. I don't regret anything about last night. Not even breaking the rules? He reached out, brushing his thumb across my cheek. The rules were made by a man who thought he didn't deserve to feel. I leaned into his touch. And what about the man lying next to me now? His voice was quiet, steady. He's still trying to believe that maybe he does. We spent the morning wrapped in sheets, wrapped in each other, moving slowly, talking softly. He asked me things he'd never dared to ask before. About my childhood, my fears, my dreams. I told him about nights spent reading to Lila when we had no power, about my dream of one day opening a music studio for underprivileged kids. He listened, fully, like every word mattered. And then he told me things too. About his father. About the emptiness of wealth without warmth. About how, until I showed up, every relationship in his life had been built on expectation or gain. You're the first person who didn't want anything from me, he said. That's not true, I corrected. I wanted everything you didn't know how to give. And somehow, he said, pulling me closer, you got it anyway. We stayed like that all day. No meetings. No press. No lies. Just two people who had finally stopped pretending. But even in the quiet joy, something lingered in the air, an unspoken truth. The contract was still real. And we hadn't talked about what came next. Later that evening, as I sat at the piano, fingers gliding through a soft melody, Damian approached from behind, his hands resting lightly on my shoulders. I canceled the merger, he said softly. I looked up at him, confused. Why? Because it was built on a lie. And I'm tired of lying. He paused. I don't want this to end when the year is over, Ava. My breath caught. I know I broke your trust, he said. But if you can give me the chance, I want to build something new. For real. I stood, turning to face him fully. No contracts. No clauses. Just love. My heart beat so loud I could barely hear myself whisper, then let's stop counting days. And start building something worth keeping. And in that moment I knew. The edge we'd been walking for months had finally become solid ground. The days that followed were unlike anything I'd experienced in my life. There were no rules anymore. No lines drawn in invisible ink. No moments stolen in secret. We were together, and this time it wasn't for the press, the merger, or the illusion. It was real. He touched me like I was something sacred. Spoke to me like I was something rare. Loved me like he was making up for every moment he'd wasted behind walls. But still, the world hadn't caught up to us yet. To them we were still the contract couple. A beautiful performance. A well-dressed lie. So when the invitation came, to a major charity gala, the same one where we'd made our debut as husband and wife, it felt like a test. I don't want to parade you, Damian said as we stood in his closet, selecting a tie. But I do want the world to see you. See us. Then we go, I said. Together. That night, the ballroom shimmered with candlelight, string music, and 1,000 eyes waiting to see how the Wolfe fairy tale would unfold. I wore a champagne gown that fell like liquid gold against my skin. He wore a black tux that made him look like a villain in a romance novel. The kind you fall for anyway. But it wasn't the outfit that made my heart stutter as we walked in. It was his hand in mine. We made our rounds. Smiles, handshakes, nods. But something felt different this time. He didn't let go of me once. His eyes never strayed. His posture was relaxed yet protective. He asked for the microphone. The crowd hushed immediately. Damian Wolfe didn't speak at events. He sponsored. He signed checks. He left before dessert. So when he stood on the stage, hand wrapped gently around mine, the room held its breath. "Good evening," he began, voice calm but commanding. "Most of you know me as the man who keeps to himself, who doesn't like cameras, who doesn't do speeches." Nervous laughter rippled across the room. "But tonight I'd like to say something very personal." He paused and his eyes found mine. "A little over a year ago I made a decision. I thought I was being clever, calculated. I built something out of convenience. I offered a contract because I didn't believe in love." The room was silent now. But then, she walked into my life. And everything I thought I knew about love, about trust, about myself, changed. He reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out a folded document. "This," he said, holding it up, "was our contract." He ripped it in half. A collective gasp filled the air. "I no longer need it," he said simply, "because I'm no longer afraid of what happens when I let someone see all of me." He turned fully to me, holding out his hand. "Ava Taylor Wolfe, I don't want a year. I don't want a deal. I want forever." My heart thundered. "Marry me again," he said, voice full. "This time without papers, without rules, just love." Tears slipped down my cheeks as I nodded. "Yes," I whispered. 1,000 times yes. The crowd erupted in applause, but all I could see was him. And all he could see was me. In that moment we weren't a performance. We weren't a scandal. We weren't a contract. We were simply real. The wedding was nothing like the first. There were no press releases. No legal teams. No urgency. Just family. His love. We stood barefoot in a garden behind the mansion, surrounded by white roses and a handful of people who mattered. Lila was there, glowing with color in her cheeks, her hair growing back in soft curls, her eyes brimming with tears as she held my bouquet with trembling hands. Greta cried too, even though she pretended it was just allergies. And Damian? He wore a simple cream suit, no tie, no mask. Just him, raw and radiant. His eyes never left mine. Not once. When we said our vows, we didn't need a microphone. We weren't speaking to the world this time. We were speaking only to each other. "I promise to love you," he said, voice shaking, "not with perfection, but with truth." I took his hands. "And I promise to choose you. Every day. Even when it's hard. Even when I'm afraid." We kissed beneath the arch of white roses. The wind carried the applause, the petals, and our laughter through the trees. And when it was done, when we were finally husband and wife without loopholes, I felt something settle in my chest. Peace. The kind of peace that says, "You've arrived. You're safe. This is home." A month later, I sat in the sunlit breakfast room with Lila, sipping tea as Damian read the paper across from us. The scent of fresh pastries lingered in the air, and somewhere down the hall, music played softly from the piano room. Lila looked at me over her teacup. "You're happy," she said. "I am," I smiled. "Truly." She leaned closer, whispering, "And you love him?" I laughed. "Yes." Ridiculously. She glanced over at Damian, who pretended to be very interested in the stock report but smirked anyway. "You deserve it," she said. And I believed her. Because I had fought for it. For her. For me. For a love that wasn't born in fairy tales, but forged in fire and rebuilt in silence. Later that evening I stood at the piano, watching Damian rock gently on his feet, our future baby in his arms. The news was still fresh, just weeks old, but his protective hand already rested against my belly whenever I passed by him. As if the life growing inside me was already his most sacred mission. And it was. For a man who once believed he couldn't feel, he now loved louder than I ever imagined. "I didn't know I could have this," I whispered from behind him. He turned to me, his eyes soft. "You didn't have to earn it, Ava," he said. "You just had to believe it was possible." I walked into his arms, pressing my head against his chest. And for the first time in my life I didn't feel like I was fighting to survive. I felt like I was home.